Hello everyone and welcome back to Mr. Watermelon's channel. At least I think this is my channel. Still, I don't really know. We are going to be reading the Wikipedia article about Inuit. If you don't know what Inuit is, you will soon shortly learn. Okay, so if you can't tell from the title of this video, in which, if you can't, I insist you learn how to read, I'm going to be reading, all of the Inuit Wikipedia. So, and you've already seen the intro. It was really eerie. I really hope you enjoyed that. But yeah, here we go. It is as anticlimactic as it sounds. So, yeah. Okay. For the 2010 film, see Inuit film. For other uses of Inuit, see Inuit disambiguation, not to be confused with the Inuit, a First Nations people in eastern Quebec and Labrador. So basically what I got from that is that these Inuit dudes are getting confused with the Inuit, and honestly, that's like really disrespectful. I'm not okay with that. So that's why I'm making this video, to educate you guys. Okay? Don't call the Inuit. They're not the same. Okay? Jeez. The Inuit, the people, are a group of culturally similar indigenous people inhabiting the Arctic regions of Greenland. So basically what I got from that, guys, is that they live in Greenland, Canada, and Alaska. The Inuit languages are part of the Eskimo Aleut family. Inuit Sign Language is a critically endangered language isolate used in Nunavut in Canada and the States. The term Eskimo, oh no, here we go, this is not okay, was commonly used by ethnic Europeans to describe the Inuit and Siberia's and Alaska's Yupik and Inuit peoples. Inuit is basically operant Inuit. However, Inuit is not accepted as a term for the Yupik, and Eskimo is the only term that applies to Yupik, Inupik, and Inuit. Wow, there's a lot of operant Inuit, okay. Since the late 20th century, indigenous peoples in Canada and Greenlandic Inuit consider Eskimo to be a pejorative, that's a weird term, and they more frequently identify as Inuit for an antonym. In Canada, blah 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 Constitution Act of blah 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 classified the Inuit as a distinctive group of Aboriginal Canadians, that's also a word, who are not included under either the First Nations or the Métis. So basically what I got from that, if you say Eskimo, you're gay. Okay, they're called Inuit. If you've seen bad video, this is important. My dog's an Inuit. My dad's an Inuit. My dog's an Inuit. Okay? It's incredibly disrespectful. The Inuit live throughout most of northern Canada in the territory of Nunavut in the northern third of Quebec, Nunavut and Labrador, and in various parts of the Northwest Territories. Okay, so basically they live everywhere, particularly around the Arctic Ocean where it's balls cold. These areas are known in the Inuit language as the Inuit Nutlut. In the United States, the Inupiat, operant Inuit, live primarily on the Alaska North Slope on the Little Diomede Island. That looks incredibly depressing. The Greenlandic Inuit are descendants of ancient indigenous migrations from Canada. As these people migrated to the east through the continent, they are citizens of Denmark, although not of the European Union. So basically, Greenlandic Inuit are descendants of ancient indigenous migrants from Canada. So basically, Canada invented Inuit. I've never thought about it that way. My mind is opened. It's fascinating stuff, I know. So, that was the first little summary. We have a long time to go, so if you haven't taken off your musical blinders yet, we're in for a long video. Hope you enjoy. Get comfy, get your snacks, and remember, sometimes you do things in life that while not might be necessary, they're necessary. So yeah, that's that. So now we're in the section pre-contact history. For earlier pre-contact history, see Indigenous peoples in Canada and Paleo Islands, period. Wow. Okay. Inuit are the descendants of what anthropologists call the Thilu people, who emerged from western... Well, frick. Break time. No, sorry. Okay. From western Alaska around 1000 CE. They had split from the related Inuit group about 4,000 years ago, and from the northeastern Siberian migrants possibly related to the Chukunu-Chukuku language group, still earlier, descended from the third major migration from Siberia. So basically everyone just migrates and it's stupidly confusing. They spread eastwards towards the Arctic. They displaced the related Dorset culture called the Tinuik and Inuit Kinnet, which was the last major Paleo-Eskimo culture. So basically, this is cultural genocide. Inuit legends speak of the Tinuit as giants, people who were taller and stronger than the Inuit. Less frequently, the legends refer to the Dorset as dwarfs. So, wow, okay, so these guys got some pretty crazy history. Freaking giants, it's insane. Researchers believe that Inuit society had advantages by having adapted to using dogs as transport animals. These guys are evolving at a much rapid pace. They're genetically engineering themselves, wow, and developing larger weapons and other techniques superior to those of the Dorset culture. By 13,000, Inuit migrants had reached West Greenland, where they settled. During the next century, they also settled in East Greenland. So basically, Inuit on Greenland. Okay. Faced with population pressures from the Thieu and other surrounding groups, such as Opran Inuit, and Opran Inuit to the south, the Opran Inuit gradually receded. The Tinuit were thought to have become completely exist as a people by 14,000, 1,500. So because of Inuit's existence, the Tinuit, which Inuit legends speak as them as giants, receded. So I guess rip freaking giants, Inuit killed giants, but you know what? It's okay. Because in the 1950s, researcher Henry B. Collins determined that, based on the runs found at Native Point, the Sand Murret, so basically Opran Inuit Part 300, were likely the last remains of the Dorset culture or Tinuit. So Dorset culture is still alive, and giant culture is still alive. The Opran Inuit population survived until winter in 1902 through 1903, when exposure to new infectious diseases brought by contact with Europeans led to their extinction as people. So basically, people are like, giants are dead, but then researcher Henry B. Collins determined that giants aren't dead, their culture's still alive. Well, they lived a lot longer than people expected, but then because Europeans are stupid, they brought all these doodads over. It's just so sad. It's like, man, all these giants died because of Europeans. I'm crying. This is really sad. In the early 21st century, mitochondrial DNA research. I never thought I would hear mitochondria outside of biology. Wow. Research has supported the theory of continuity between the giant people and the random other off-brand Inuit people. It also provided evidence that a population displacement did not occur within the Inuit Islands between the Dorset and Thule transition, so more off-brand Inuit. In contrast to the Inuit populations, the Inuit and Tsalulu benefited from both geographical isolation and their ability to adopt certain Thule technologies. In Canada and Greenland, Inuit circulated almost exclusively north of the Arctic tree line, the effective southern border of Inuit society. The most southern, officially recognized Inuit community in the world is Rigula in Navistoluit. Okay, so wherever that is, everyone lives in Navistoluit. South of Navistoluit, the descendants of the Southern Labrador Inuit in Navakuvika continue their traditional trees-much semi-nomadic way of life until the mid-1900s. Wow, I hate this word. The Navakunuit people usually moved among islands and bays on a seasonal basis. They did not establish stationary communities. In other areas, south of the tree line, non-Inuit indigenous cultures were well established. The culture and technology of Inuit society that served so well in the Arctic were not suited to subarctic regions, so they did not displace their southern neighbors. So basically, all these people suck. Okay, except for Inuit, of course. All the off-brand, they all died. Inuit had relationships with more southern cultures. Boundary disputes were common and gave rise to aggressive actions. Warfare was not uncommon among these Inuit groups with sufficient population density. Inuit, such as the Namuit, Numiniminu, I hate all these words, who inhabited the Niminuit River Delta area, often engaged in warfare. The more sparsely settled Inuit in Central Arctic, however, did less so often. So basically, if you're an Inuit in Central Arctic, you're like OP. The first European contact with the Vikings who settled in Greenland and explored the eastern Canadian coast, the sagas recorded meeting Skarhai, probably an what is this word? Undifferentiated label for all the indigenous peoples whom the Norse encountered, whether Inuit, Inuit, or Beethoic. So now we're freaking getting with Vikings. This is some crazy exciting history. After about 13,500, the climate grew colder during the period known as the Little Ice Age. How depressing of a time is that? Not the Ice Age, it's the Little Ice Age. Wow. Depressing. During this period, Alaskan natives were able to continue their whaling activities, but in the high Arctic, where all the peaceful Inuit live, of course, the Inuit were forced to abandon their hunting and whaling sites as bowhead whales disappeared from Canada and Greenland. Wow, how sad. These Inuit had to subsist on a much poorer diet and lost access to the essential raw materials for the tools, architecture, which they had previously derived from whaling. So man, this is unfair. Because of the Little Ice Age, because of that squirrely dude, all the peaceful Inuit who didn't get in many fights are now being starved because all these whales are yo, let's dip, it's freezing cold, even though it's not even that cold. It can't be that cold if it's called the Little Ice Age. Come on. So I'm getting really teared up over here. Wow, so sad. The changing climate forced the Inuit to work their way south, pushing them into marginal niches along the edges of the tree line. These were the areas which Native Americans had not occupied or where they were weak enough for the Inuit to live near them. Researchers have difficulty defining when Inuit stopped this territorial expansion. There is evidence, however, that they were still moving into new territory in southern Labrador when they first began to interact with European colonists, which will give them all Ebola a few years later in the 17th century. Post-contact history. Canada. Here we go. Remember when I was talking about how Ebola came to these Inuit? And they all freaking died? Yeah, here we go. Here's that. This is basically just all a context time, so... yeah. The lives of Paleo-Eskimos... Well, okay, I just got sent unbelievably not hilarious meme, so that's that. The lives of Paleo-Eskimos of the far north were largely unaffected by the arrival of visiting Norsemen except for mutual trade. So Paleo-Eskimos were not affected by Ebola. So Paleo-Eskimos are like evolved Inuit, basically. The Labrador Inuit have had the longest continuous contact with Europeans. After the disappearance of Norse colonies in Greenland, the Inuit had no contact with Europeans for at least a century. By the mid-16th century, Basque whalers and fishermen were already working the Labrador coast and had established whaling stations on land, such as the one that had been excavated at Red Bay, Labrador. The Inuit do not appear to have interfered with their operations, but the natives raided the stations in winter, taking tools and items made of worked iron, which they adopted into their own needs. So, Inuit overall, I feel like are pretty peaceful. But freaking natives, yeah, they take all the crap. Martin Fochberg's 1576 search for the Northwest Passage was the first well-documented contact between Europeans and Inuit. Oh, frick, here's the Ebola part. Frostbreer's expedition landed in Frostbreer's Bay, Baffin Island, not far from the settlement, now called the city of Inquat. Frostbreer encountered Inuit on Resolution Island. That's a cool island name. Where 5 sailors left the ship under orders from Frostbreer. They became part of Inuit mythology. The homesick sailors, tired of their adventure, attempted to leave in a small vessel and vanished. Frostbreer brought an unwilling Inuit to England, possibly the first Inuit to ever visit Europe. In contrast, the Inuit oral tradition recounts the natives helping Frostbreer's crewmen, who they believed had been abandoned. So basically, this Frostbreer guy, he like sees Inuit or whatever on this island called Resolution Island. 5 sailors, while on the island, left the ship because Frostbreer said, and all these Inuit are watching this. These sailors, tired of their adventure, left and were never seen again. Awesome. So now the Inuit saw this and were like, well, this is insane. This is now like mythology. And they probably made it in some crazy story talking about like something. Because like, yeah. The exchanges that accompanied the arrival and colonization by the Europeans greatly damaged the Inuit way of life. Oh, here comes Ebola. Frick. Greatly damaged the Inuit way of life. Mass death was caused by new infectious diseases carried by whalers and explorers, to which the indigenous people had no acquired immunity. The high mortality rate contributed to the enormous social disruptions caused by the distorting effect of Europeans' material wealth and introduction of different materials. Nonetheless, Inuit society in the higher latitudes largely remained in isolation during the 19th century. Okay, so they didn't all die, but they all died. Okay, awesome. The Hudson's Bay Company opened trading posts such as Great Well River in 1820. Today, the site of the twin villages of Wakamustu and Wakamustu, where whale products of the commercial whale hunt were processed and first traded. The British naval expedition of 1821, led by Admiral William Edward Parry, twice overwintered in Fox Basin. It provided the first informed, sympathetic, and well-documented account of the economic, social, and religious life of the Inuit. That sentence is in bad video. Parry stayed in what is now called Lugalik over the second winter. Parry's writings with pen and ink illustrations of Inuit everyday life, and those of George Francis Lyon, were widely read after they were both published in 1824. Captain George Commer's Inuit wife, Shufli, known for sewing skills and elegant attire, was influential in convincing him to acquire more sewing accessories and beads for trade with Inuit. So basically this guy, he goes and sees the Inuit, and his wife freaking sews all this stuff to trade with the Inuit. This dude's wife is OP, man. OP, I tell you, OP. Early 20th century. Okay, we're not close at all. Just letting you guys know. During the early 20th century, a few traders and missionaries circulated among the more accessible bands. After 1904, they were accompanied by a handful of Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Oh my gosh. Okay, my phone's distracting me, sorry. They were accompanied by a handful of Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Unlike most Aboriginal peoples in Canada, however, the Inuit did not occupy lands that were coveted by European settlers. So Inuit lived in places that sucked, so all these European dudes with Ebola want to mess with our land. Used to more temperate climates and conditions. Oh my gosh. Most Europeans considered the homeland of the Inuit to be a hostile hinterland. Southerners enjoyed lucrative careers as bureaucrats and service providers to the peoples of the North, but very few ever chose to visit there. Okay, so these Inuit are freaking smart. They live in, like, hostile hinterland, so none of these European dudes with the ball get them. It's a genius. They're genius. Once its more hospitable lands were largely settled, the government of Canada and the entrepreneurs began to take greater interest in its more peripheral territories, especially the fur and mineral-rich hinterlands. By the late 1920s, there were no longer any Inuit who had not been contacted by traders, missionaries, or government agencies. Okay, so rip Inuit, I guess. In 1939, the Supreme Court of Canada found, in a decision known as Free Eskimos, that the Inuit should be considered Indians and were thus under the jurisdiction of the federal government. Okay, so rip Inuit. The government's like, how can we get these guys to, like, do what we want? Oh, let's just make them Indians. Okay. Native customs were worn down by the actions of RCMP, who enforced Canadian criminal law on the Inuit. People such as Kikkik, who's an Inuit woman who in 1958 was charged with, but acquitted. Wow, okay. So basically, RCMP sucks. They're the bad guys, who often did not understand the rules of the Inuit society with which they had to interact. In addition, the generally protest missionaries of the British preached a moral code very different from the one that Inuit had as part of their tradition. Many of the Inuit were systematically converted to Christianity in the 19th and 20th centuries through rituals such as the Sikh. So Europeans suck in a nutshell. Second World War to the 1960s. World War II and the Cold War made Arctic Canada strategically important to the great powers for the first time. Hey, Canada does something. Thanks to the development of modern long-distance aircraft, these areas became accessible year-round. The construction of air bases and the distant early warning line in the 1940s and 1950s brought more intensive contacts with European society, particularly in the form of public education for children. The traditionalists complained that Canadian education promoted foreign values that were disdainful for the tradition, structure, and culture of Inuit society. So this is literally cultural genocide by the government. How cool is that? In the 1950s, the government of Canada undertook what was called the High Arctic Relocation for several reasons. These were to include protecting Canada's I don't know how to pronounce that. Alleviating hunger, as the area currently occupied had been overhunted, and attempting to solve the Eskimo problem by seeking assimilation of the people and at the end of their traditional Inuit culture. One of the more notable relocations was undertaken in 1953, when 17 families were moved from Port Harrison, now in Quebec, to Resolute and Grice Forward. They were dropped off in early September when winter had already arrived. Wow, how cruel. Freaking, hey, it's like the day before Christmas, and we're just gonna, like, move you from your houses in your home. Like, cool. The land they were sent to was very different from that in the Inuit area. It was barren, with only a couple of months when the temperature rose above freezing, and several months of polar night. Wow, freaking How sad is that? The families were told by the bad guys, RCMP, they would be able to return to their home territory within 2 years if conditions were not right. However, 2 years later, more Inuit families were relocated to the high Arctic. 30 years passed before they were able to visit Inuit. By 1953, Canada's Prime Minister Louis St. Larrett publicly admitted, "Apparently, we have administered the vast territories of the North in an almost continuing absence of mind." The government began to establish about 40 permanent administrative centres to provide education, health, and economic development services. Inuit from hundreds of smaller camps scattered across the North began to congregate in these hamlets. So now it's like the Holocaust, but Inuit, but no one's died. That wasn't funny. Regular visits from doctors and access to modern medical care raised the birth rate and decreased the death rate, causing a marked natural increase in the population that made it more difficult for them to survive by traditional means. In the 1950s, the Canadian government began to actively settle Inuit into permanent villages and cities. So now it's like, yeah, let's just make these people normal. Occasionally, against their will, such as Nunavut and Huron. In 2005, the Canadian government acknowledged the abuses inherent in these forced resettlements. By the mid-1960s, encouraged first by missionaries, then by prospect to pay jobs in governmental service, and finally forced by hunger and required by the police, most Canadian Inuit lived year-round in permanent settlements. Wow, how unbelievably exciting is that? The nomadic migrations that were the central feature of Arctic life had become a much smaller part of life in the North. The Inuit, a once self-sufficient people in an extremely harsh environment, were, in the span of perhaps 2 generations, transformed into a small, impoverished minority, lacking skills or resources to serve the larger economy, but increasingly dependent on it for survival. That's pretty lame. These guys literally cultural genocide, but it's too late now because it's like they already rely on this larger economy. Cultural so this is like the sad part of the Wikipedia article. Oh, there's a section called nomenclature. That is not the proper nomenclature. So I think this is called cultural renewal, so it should be all happy or something. In the 1960s, the Canadian government funded the establishment of secular government-operated high schools in the Northwest Territories, including what is now Nunavut and Inuit areas in Quebec and Labrador, along with a residential school system. The Inuit population was not large enough to support a full high school in every community, so this meant only a few schools were built, and students from across territories were boarded there. These schools in Evelek, Inuit, Yevlik, Inuit, and Kilvik brought together young Inuit from across the Arctic in one place for the first time, and exposed them to the rhetoric of civil and human rights that prevailed in Canada in the 1960s. So you're moving them to new high schools, and it's like human rights, so it's freaking all this like feminist crap or whatever. This was okay, I have no idea why this turned off, but it did, so I don't know where we were when it turned off, but I don't know. Okay, so, well, here's a summary. All these Inuit who got forced to go high schools in, like, the 1960s in Canada when the Human Rights Act was, like, really a big thing. All these, like, young Inuit dudes are like, oh, shoot, human rights, we care about our land now because, oh, shoot, everyone else cares about everything else, so, frick, we need to care about our land and we're gonna rebel, right? Because we just need more rebelling people. The Inuit began to emerge as a political force in the late 1960s and early 70s, shortly after the first graduates returned home. Okay, so all these dudes that care about stuff. Okay. They formed new politically active associations in the early 1970s, starting with the Inuit Titlet of Canada, Inuit Brotherhood, and today known as Inuit Tabarek Kanamulika, an outgrowth of the Indian and Eskimo associations of the 60s. In 1971, and more region-specific organizations shortly afterwards, including the Committee for the Original Peoples Entitlement, representing the Inuit, the Northern Quebec Inuit Association, and the Labrador Inuit Association, LIA, representing Northern Labrador Inuit. Since the mid-1980s, the Southern Labrador Inuit of Nukatka began organizing politically after being geographically cut out of the LIA. Wow, how sad. However, for political expediency, the organization was erroneously called the Labrador Métis Nation. These various activist movements began to change the direction of Inuit society in 1975 when the James Bay and Northern Quebec Agreement. This comprehensive land claim settlement for Quebec Inuit, along with a large cash settlement and substantial administrative that's a word, I don't even know what that is, in the new region of Nevkik. Okay, so basically all these guys are being political because they want to be like in society now because they're like a natural bar of society. Cool. So the precedent for the settlements to fall. The Northern Labrador Inuit submitted their land claim in 1977. However, they had to wait until 2005 to have signed a land settlement establishing Nifsville. Southern Labrador Inuit of Navtkimdike are currently in the process of establishing land claims and title rights that would allow them to negotiate with the Newfoundland government. I doubt that'll ever happen. Canada's 1982 Constitution Act recognized the Inuit as Aboriginal peoples in Canada, but not First Nations, wherever that is. In the same year, the Tunkatuga Federation, TFN, was incorporated. In order to take over negotiations for land claims on behalf of the Inuit living in the eastern Northwest Territories, that would later become Nunavut for the Inuit community, which became a joint association of the Inuit in Quebec, Labrador, and Northwest Territories. That was I'm just going to say whoever wrote that one was not amazing. I know multiple people, right, but it was just grammatically really funky. Inuit cabinet members at the federal level. On October 30th, 2008, I was freaking alive. This is crazy. I'm a part of this Wikipedia, basically. Lika Kililek was appointed as Minister of Health, becoming the first Inuit to hold a senior cabinet position. Although she is not the first Inuit to be in a cabinet altogether, Jack Alec and Jack Odelka were both parliamentary secretaries respectively from 1993 to 1996 and in 2003. Nomenclature. In the United States, the term Eskimo is still commonly used because it includes Inuit, Inupiaq, and Yupik peoples, whilst distinguishing them from the American Indians. The Yupik do not speak an Inuit language nor consider themselves to be Inuit, so the Yupik aren't even operating Inuit. They're cool and edgy, so they just decide to become their own thing, I guess. However, the term is probably That's just probably a megadiga extra, as well as being widely used in folk etymology, as meaning eater of raw meat in the Cree language. It is now considered pejorative or even a racial slur amongst the Canadian and English-speaking Greenlandic Inuit. See, all these people are calling these Inuit Eskimos. No, that's not how it works, okay? Don't call them Eskimos. Also, sorry if this camera randomly stops. Don't be surprised if it randomly stops. Cultural history. Wow, because we've never gone over that. I guess we're just going over the history, but now doing culture. Inuit speak Inuktitut and Greenlandic languages, which belong to the Inuit branch of the Eskimo-Alien language family. The Greenlandic languages are divided into Kutkitka and Tukutka. Inuit is spoken in Canada, and along with Inuktitut is one of the official language of Inuktitut. They are known collectively as the Inuit language. In the Northwest Territories, Inuktitut and Inuktitut are all official languages. Katkitka is the official language of Greenland. As Inuktitut was the language of Eastern Canada, Inuit and Kitkitka is the language of the Western Greenlandic Inuit. They are related more closely than most other dialects. Inuit in Alaska and Northern Canada also speak English. In Greenland, Inuit also speak Danish and learn English in school. Canadian Inuit may also speak French. Finally, deaf Inuit speak Inuit Sign Language, which is a language isolate and almost extinct, as around only 50 people still speak it. Oh, that should be one of those 50 people. Diet. The Inuit have traditionally been fishers and hunters. Yeah, what about the whales? Oh, okay, whales. They still hunt whales, bowhead whales, walrus, cavalier seal, polar bears, muskegon, muskonks, birds, and fish, and at times other less commonly eaten animals such as the Arctic fox. The typical Inuit diet is high in protein and very high in fat. Wow, so all these guys are like obese. And their traditional diets, Inuit consumes an average of 75% of their daily energy intake from fat. Okay, so they're fat, but they use the fat, so it's okay. While it is not possible to cultivate plants from food in the Arctic, the Inuit have traditionally gathered those that are naturally available. So they try and be vegetarian, but it's hard when you're in the Arctic, I just know so much about the Arctic. Grasses, tubers, fruits, stems, berries, and seaweed, wow, amazing, were collected and preserved depending on the season and the location. There's a vast array of different hunting technologies that the Inuit use to gather their food. One of these technologies would be ripping the food out of the ground. Frick, there's no food, there's no plants in the Arctic, frick. In the 1920s, anthropologist lived with and studied a group of Inuit. The study focused on the fact that the Inuits' low-carbohydrate diet had no adverse effects on their health, nor indeed Stephanson's own health. Stephanson also observed that the Inuit were able to get the necessary vitamins they needed from their traditional winter diet, which did not contain any plant matter. What is going on? Why is everything in the Arctic so healthy even though it's not supposed to be healthy? Conspiracy theory. In particular, he found that adequate vitamin C could be obtained from the items in the traditional diet of raw meat such as ringed seal liver and whale skin. Wow. So if you're running low on vitamin C, eat seal liver and whale skin. That's obviously easily accessible. While there was considerable skepticism when he reported these findings, they had been borne out in recent studies and analyses. However, the Inuit had lifespans 12 to 15 years shorter than the average Canadians, which is thought to be a result of limited access to medical services. Yeah, of course, that seems logical. The life expectancy. Why can't I say that? I know expectancy. The life expectancy gap is not closing. Furthermore, fish oil supplement studies have failed to support claims of preventing heart attacks or strokes. Thanks. So these Inuit, they know what their diet is. These guys are I'm recording. I can't tell if this is focused. Hello? So, how's it going? The camera is sporadically shut off. Anytime it's been that was kind of the main official time that it did it. So now you're seeing this. I don't know why, but yeah. Goodbye. Okay, we're good now. No, we're not, but I don't care. Okay, so here we go. We got a new camera angle. I know, how crazy is that? And it's, probably not in focus, but it's like, do I really care? No, I don't. I really don't. So that's that. Okay, so here we go. The Inuit peoples hunted sea animals. This is the transport, navigation, and dogs section. Exciting. The Inuit peoples hunted sea animals from single passenger and covered sealskin boats called kwak, Inuit syllables, which were extraordinarily buoyant and could easily be reached by a seated person, even if completely overturned. Because of this property, the design was copied by Europeans. Wow, Europeans would never copy a design like ever. Who would do that? And Americans who still produce them under the Inuit name kayak. Oh, frick. Inuit invented kayaks. Dang. Didn't know that. Inuit also made Inuit women's boat, larger open boats made of wood frames covered with animal skins for transporting people, goods, and dogs. They were 6 through 12 meters long and had a flat bottom so the boats could come close to the shore. In the winter, Inuit would also hunt sea mammals by patiently watching an igloo breathing hole in the ice and waiting for the air-breathing seals to use them. Well, okay. This technique is also used by the polar bear, who hunts by seeking holes in the ice and waiting nearby for the dumplings. Oh, the polar bear likes eating the fishes. In winter, both on land and on sea ice, the Inuit use dog sleds for transportation. How awesome is that? The husky dog breed comes from Inuit breeding of dogs and wolves for transportation. Whoa. Freaking Inuit invented huskies, basically. A team of dog in either a tandem side-to-side or fan formation would pull a sled made of wood, animal bones, or the baleen from a whale's mouth. A baleen is a... What's a baleen? I don't know. Over the snow and ice, the Inuit use stars to navigate at sea and landmarks to navigate on land. They possessed a comprehensive native system of tophomony, where natural landmarks were inefficient. The Inuit would erect an inshuk. So it was stone structure, basically. Dogs played the dumpling part. Dogs played an integral role in the annual routine of the Inuit. During the summer, they became pack animals, sometimes dragging up to 20 kilobytes, 44 pounds of baggage, and in the winter when they pulled the sled. Year-long, they assisted with hunting by sniffing out seals, holes, and pestering polar bears. They also protected the Inuit villages by barking at bears and strangers. The Inuit generally favored and tried to breed the most striking and handsome of the dogs, especially the ones with bright eyes and a healthy coat. Common husky dog breeds used by Inuit were the Canadian Eskimo dog, the official animal of the Navuit. So the Inuit did something, and it's the official national dog of the Navuit. Does that make sense? No, but okay. Good. Inuit for dog, the Greenland dog, the Siberian husky, and Alaskan Mammut. The Inuit would perform rituals over the newborn pup to give it favorable qualities. So they're literally doing genetic engineering through spiritual worshiping. How cool is that? The legs were pulled to make them grow. Strong. I have no idea what that is. And the nose was poked with a pin to enhance the sense of smell. Guys, we're not close. Industry, art, and clothing. Inuit industry relied almost exclusively on animal hides, driftwood, and bones. Although some tools were made out of worked stones, particularly the readily worked soapstone, walrus ivory was a particularly essential material used to make knives. Art played a big part in Inuit society and continues to do so today. Small sculptures of animals and human figures, usually depicting everyday activities such as hunting and whaling, were carved from ivory and bone. In modern times, prints and figurative works carved in relatively soft stones such as soapstone, serpentinite, or ardra have also become popular. Inuit made clothes and footwear from animal skins sewn together using needles made from animal bones and threads made from other animal products such as sinew. Wow, amazing. The Anurik parka is made in similar fashion by Arctic peoples from Europe, though Asia and the Americans, including the Inuit. The hood of an amulet, they could have just said women's parka, was traditionally made extra large with a separate compartment below the hood to allow the mother to carry a baby against her back and protect it from the harsh wind. Styles vary region to region, from the shape of the hood to the length of the towels. Boots could be made from carbo or sealskin and designed for men and women. There's really loud trumpet music playing, so I'm going to stop it. I'll be back. Honestly, I think I need to wear these sunglasses. I just look that cool. I'll wear them. Frick, it's freaking like dark as balls. I can't see anything. Oh my gosh. Okay, so basically Inuit invented women's parkas and parkas. That's cool, I guess. During the winter, this is still the industry iron clothing section, certain Inuit lived in a temporary shelter made from snow called an igloo. Fascinating. And during the few months of the year when temperatures were above freezing, they lived in tents known as tupik, made of animal skins supported by a frame of bones or wood. Some, such as the Siglit, used driftwood, while others built sod houses. Here we go. Feminism part, gender roles, marriage, birth, and community. The division of labor in traditional Inuit society had a strong gender component, but it was not absolute. The men were traditionally hunters and fishermen, and the women took care of the children, cleaned the home, sewed, processed food, and cooked. However, there are numerous examples of women who hunted out of the necessity or as a personal choice. At the same time, men, who could be away from camp for several days at a time, would be expected to know how to sew and cook. Wow, sewing and dudes, it's very masculine. Proud of you, Inuit guys. The martial customs among the Inuit were not strictly monogamous. That's a word. Oh, wow. Many Inuit relationships were implicitly or explicitly sexual. Open marriages, polygamy, divorce, and remarriage were known. Among some Inuit groups, if there were children, divorce required the approval of the community, and particularly the agreement of the elders. So old guys were OP in Inuit society, and women, old women, and guys. Come on. Marriages were often arranged, sometimes in infancy, and occasionally forced on the couple by the community. Marriage was common for women at puberty, and for men when they became productive hunters. Family structure was flexible. A household might consist of man and his wife or wives, polygamy, and children. It might also include his parents or his wife's parents, as well as adopted children. It might be a larger foundation of several siblings with their parents, wives, and children, or even more than one family sharing dwellings and resources. Every household has its head, an elder, or a particular respected man. There is also a large notion of community, as generally several families shared a piece where they wintered. Goods were shared within a household, and also to a significant extent within a whole community. The Inuit were hunter-gatherers and had been referred to as nomadic. One of the customs allowing birth of an infant was an Akgat shaman to place a tiny ivory carving of a well into the baby's mouth in hopes this would make the child good at hunting. How friggin' weird is that? Loud singing and drumming were also customary after birth. You know, that sounds awesome. Why was a freaking well body part not put in my mouth when I was born? With customary loud singing and drumming. That sounds awesome. Rating. Remember at the beginning when I'm like, Inuit are peaceful? Yeah. Virtually all Inuit cultures have oral tradition of arrays and other indigenous peoples, including fellow Inuit, and of taking vengeance on them in return, such as the Bloody Falls Massacre. Wow, that sounds awesome. Western observers often regard these tales as generally not entirely accurate historical events. Okay, so frick. But more as self-serving myths. Oh, okay. However, evidence shows that Inuit cultures had quite accurate methods of teaching historical accounts to each new generation. So basically, Wow, these guys are good with their history. In northern Canada, historically, there were ethnic feuds between the Dene and the Inuit, as witnessed by Sandal Hille in 1771. In 1996, cameras freaking out, sorry if it breaks, Dene and Inuit representatives participated, while I can talk, in a healing ceremony to reconcile the centuries-old grievances. The historic accounts of violence against outsiders does make clear that there was a history of hostile contact with the Inuit cultures and with other cultures. It also makes it clear that Inuit nations existed through history as well as confederations as such nations. The known confederations, what the heck, were usually formed to defend against a more prosperous and thus stronger nation. Alternatively, people who lived in less productive and geographical areas tended to be less warlike, as they had to spend more time producing food. Okay, so I was kind of right when I was like, the more obscure Inuit don't fives us. Yeah, I was totally right. Not to be narcissistic or anything. Justice within Inuit culture was moderated by the form of governance that gave significant power to the elders. Once again, power to the elders. I'm telling you, old people are OP in Inuit society. As in most cultures around the world, justice could be harsh and often included capital punishment for serious crimes against the community or the individual. During raids against other peoples, the Inuit, like their non-Inuit neighbors, tended to be merciless. Wow, this is just getting darker. Suicide, murder, and death. A pervasive European myth about Inuit is that they killed elderly and unproductive people. But this is not generally true. Generally, thank you for adding that word. That made it seem very awesome. In a culture with an oral history, elders are the keepers of communal knowledge effectively in the community library. Because they are an extreme value as the repository of knowledge, there are cultural taboos against sacrificing elders. Obviously, you can sacrifice like anyone else who sucks, but freaking elders, no, they're all overpowered because they like work at the library. In Atun A. Leonard's book Suicide in Canada, he states that Rasmussen found that the death of elders by suicide was a commonplace among the Inuit Inuit. So just opera and Inuit again. According to Franz Boas, suicide was not of rare occurrence and was generally accomplished through hanging. Writing of the Labrador Inuit caucus was considerably more explicit on the subject of suicide and the burden of the urge people who have outlived their usefulness and whose life is a burden to both themselves and their relatives are put to death by stabbing or strangulation. This is a customary done at the request of the individual concerned, but not always so. Aged people who are a hindrance on the trails are abandoned. Some random dude who wrote about suicide in Canada. When food is not sufficient, the elderly are least likely to survive. In the extreme case of famine, the Inuit fully understood that if there was to be any type of obtaining more food, a hunter was necessarily the one to feed on whatever food was left. However, a common response to desperate conditions and the threat of starvation was... What? Wow, that's dark. Starvation was the killing of infants, basically. A mother abandoned an infant in hopes that someone less desperate might find and adopt the child before the cold or animals killed it. The belief that the Inuit regularly resorted to infanticide may be due in part to studies done by Askutgat and David Richards. Among the Neskalik, Opera and Inuit, among the channel of Ki, other recent research has noted that while there is little disagreement that there are examples of infanticide in Inuit communities, it is presently not known in the depth and breadth of these incidents. The research is neither complete nor conclusive to allow for a determination of whether infanticide was a rare or widely practiced event. There is no agreement about actual estimates about the frequency of newborn female infanticide in the Inuit population. Carmel Shinshawn mentions diverse studies ranging from 15 through 50% to 80%. Anthropologists believe that Inuit cultures routinely kill children born with physical defects because of the demands of the extreme climate. These views were changed by late 20th century discoveries of burials and archaeologists cite. Between 1982 and 1994, a storm with high winds caused ocean waves to erode part of the bluffs near Barrow, Alaska, and a body was discovered to have been washed out of the mud. Okay. Unfortunately, the storm claimed the body, which was not recovered, but examination of the eroded bank indicated that an ancient house, perhaps with other remains, was likely to be claimed by the next storm. The site, known as Yukusukusku Archaeological Site, was excavated. Several frozen bodies, now known as the Frozen Family, incredibly creatively named, good job that person, were recovered, autopsies were performed, and they were interred as the first burials in the new then Inkoskoi Cemetery south of Barrow. Years later, another body was washed out of the bluff. It was a female child, approximately 9 years old, who had clearly been born with a I can't even say that. Born with some birth defect. This child had never been able to walk, but must have been cared for by the family throughout her life. She was the best preserved body ever recovered in Alaska. Radiocarbon dating of grave goods and a strand of hair place her back to around 1200 cc. Health. Hopefully this isn't as depressing because frick, Inuit society is crazy. During the 19th century, the Western Arctic suffered a population decline close to 90%. Wow, resulting from exposure to... okay, so basically, in a nutshell, Ebola leaves, Ebola comes back, caused by Europeans, including tuberculosis, measles, influenza, and smallpox. Okay, that's a lot more than Ebola. Autopsies near Greenland reveal that more commonly pneumonia... What's that word? I know how to pronounce it. Ammonia. Yeah, with that. Kidney diseases, trichosis, malnutrition, and degenerative disorders may have contributed to mass deaths among different Inuit tribes. The Inuit believe that the causes of the disease were of a spiritual origin. I should write a story about the spiritual origin of these diseases. Like, what would be the spiritual origin of tuberculosis, measles, or like influenza? Like, I don't know. Canadian churches and eventually the federal government ran the earliest health facilities for the Inuit population. Okay, so Canada's slowly getting good. Come on. Whether fully segregated hospitals or what is that word? And wards attached to settler hospitals. These Indian hospitals were focused on treating people for tuberculosis, which may I add was caused by a spiritual thing. Though diagnosis was difficult and treatment involved forced removal of individuals from the communities for inpatient confinement in other parts of the country. Wow, so if you're Inuit and you, this is definitely focused, but I don't care. If you're an Inuit and you have tuberculosis, freaking just don't have tuberculosis. Easy. I'm just like constantly yawning now. I don't even care. Wow. When you take off sunglasses, by the way, I was ironically wearing those. Freaking everything is so bright. Oh my gosh. In October 2017, this is still the health section, the Federal Minister of Indigenous Services, Jane Philifot, announced that in 2015, tuberculosis was 270 times more common among the Canadian Inuit than it is among non-Indigenous Southern Canadians. Wow, frick. Tuberculosis and Inuit go hand in hand. The Canadian Medical Association Journal published in 2013 that tuberculosis among Canadian Inuit has dramatically increased since 1997. In 2010, the incidence of NIVIA was 304 per 100,000, more than 66 times the rate seen in general population. Isn't tuberculosis like the lungs that's treated by antibiotics? Isn't it getting really bad because everyone overuses antibiotics? Freaking Do the Inuit all have antibiotics? I guess they're much more like that one section said in the beginning. A part of general society, but so yeah, okay. Here we go. The law. Inuit traditional laws are anthropologically different from Western law concepts. I'm not even going to try and attempt to say that word. Customary law was thought non-existent in Inuit society before the introduction of the Canadian legal system, Hobel, in 1954. Concluded that rudimentary law existed among the Inuit. No known Western observer before 1970 was aware that any form of government existed among any Inuit. However, there was a set of way of doing things that had to be followed. Megidgat refers to what has to be followed. Bigidgat refers to what has to be done. Chukutsuksula refers to what has to be avoided. Wow. If an individual's actions went against the Chukutsukskat, Mechkutskata, or Bigidgat, the Chukutsukat shaman might have to intervene, lest the consequences be dire to the individual or the community. We are told today that Inuit never had laws on Machkala. Why? Because they say because they are not written on paper. When I think of paper, I think you can tear it up and the laws are gone. The laws of the Inuit are not on paper. That was an incredibly stupid quote, okay. Traditional beliefs. The environment in which the Inuit lived inspired a mythology filled with adventure tales of whale and walrus hunts. Wow, whales are a very prominent part in Inuit society. I realize that. Whales. Long winter months of waiting for caribou herds or sitting near breathing holes hunting seals gave birth to stories of mysterious and sudden appearance of ghosts and fantastical creatures. Some Inuit looked into the Aurora Borealis or Northern Lights to find images of their family and friends dancing the next life. I guess they must be pretty green in the next life. However, some Inuit believed that the lights were more sinister, and if you whistled at them, wait, what? And if you whistled at them, they would come down and cut off your head. This tale is still told to children today. Wow, okay. For others, they were invisible giants, the souls of animals, a guide to hunting, and as a spirit of the Akutgat to help with healing. They relied upon the Akutgat shaman for spiritual interpretation. Random camera things blinking, sorry if it randomly turns off. The nearest thing to central deity was old woman Sedla, who lived beneath the sea. The waters, a central food source, were believed to contain great gods. Okay. Aurora Borealis is OP, I guess. The Inuit practice a form of shamanism based on animist principles. They believe that all things had a form of spirit, including humans, and that to some extent these spirits could be influenced by a pantheon of supernatural entities that could be appeased when one required some animal or inanimate thing to act in a certain way. The Akutguk, a community of Inuit that was not the leader, but rather sort of healer and psychotherapist, who tended wounds and offered advice, as well as invoking the spirits to assist people in their lives. His or her whole role was to see, interpret, and exhort the subtle and unseen and were not trained. They were held to be born with the ability and recognized by the community as they approached adulthood. Inuit religion was closely tied to a system of rituals integrated into the daily life of the people. These rituals were simple but held to be necessary, according to a customary Inuit saying, "The great pearl of our existence lies in the fact that die consists entirely of souls." By believing that all things, including animals, have souls like of those of humans, anyone that failed to show appropriate respect and customary supplication would only give the liberated spirits causing to avenge themselves. The harshness and unpredictability of life in Arctic ensured that Inuit lived with we're going back to normal. It's not quote voice anymore. Inuit lived with concern for the uncontrollable, where a streak of bad luck could destroy an entire community. To offer a spirit was to risk its interference with an already marginal existence. Wow, this is unbelievably existential. The Inuit understood that they had to work in harmony with supernatural powers to provide the necessities of day-to-day life. Okay, these Inuit culture, they work with the freaking Borealis gods. Demographics. In total, there are about 148,000 Inuit living in 4 countries: Canada, Greenland, Denmark, and the United States. Canada. Although the 50,480 Inuit listed in the 2006 Canada census can be found throughout Canada, the majority, 44,470, live in 4 regions. As of 2006 Canada census, there were 4,715 Inuit living in Newfoundland and Labrador, and about 2,160 live in Nunavut. There are also 6,000 Kivu people living in southern Labrador and what is called Nunavut. As of 2006 Canada census, there were 4,165 Inuit living in the Northwestern Territories. The majority, about 3,115, live in the 6 communities of the Inuit settlement region. As of 2006 Canada census, there were 24,650 Inuit living in Nunavut. In Nunavut, the Inuit population forms a majority of all communities and is the only jurisdiction. I don't even care that. I don't care that that's a word of Canada, where Aboriginal peoples form a majority. As of 2006 Canada census, there were 10,950 Inuit living in Quebec. The majority, about 9,565, live in Nunavut. Greenland, according to the 2018 edition, the World Facebook Factbook, published by the Central Intelligence Agency, the Inuit population of Greenland is 88%, 50,787, out of a total of 50,713 people. Like Nunavut, the population lives throughout the region. Denmark. This is so boring. The population size of Greenland people in Denmark varies from source to source between 15,000 and 20,000. I think I should clap. Okay. I'm so close to being done, but this camera ran out of crap, so freaking now we're just on this, so it's great. Freaking great. Okay, we're nearly there, guys. Ooh, they're so close. We're so close. It was directed by Jacques Tschud and written, filmed, produced, directed, and acted almost entirely by the Inuit of Iqaluit. In 2009, the film Le Voyage des Inuits, a Greenlandic language feature film, was directed by Mac Madison and co-written by Madison and French film producer Jean-Marc Houlton. One of the most famous Inuit artists is Pisurluk Ashuna. Susan Agaluk is a popular singer. Why am I burping? Worked at preserving Inuit, so opera and Inuit, and wrote one of the first novels ever published in that language. In 2006, Cape Dorset was hailed as Canada's most artistic city. That seems incredibly subjective, but with 20% of the labor force employed in the arts, never mind, it's not subjective, it's facts. Inuit art, such as soapstone carvings, is one of the Nunavut's opera and Inuit most important industries. Recently, there has been an identity struggle among the younger generations of Inuit between their traditional heritage and modern society, with their cultures having been forced to assimilate into in order to maintain a livelihood. With their current dependence on modern society for necessities, including governmental jobs, food, aid, medicine, etc., the Inuit have had much interaction and exposure to the societal norms outside the previous cultural boundaries. The stressors regarding the identity crisis among teachers have led to disturbingly high numbers of suicide. Wow, that's fortunate. A series of authors have focused among the innocent Maipia and the youngest generations of Inuit. Maipia was almost unknown prior to the Inuit adoption of Western culture. Principal theories are the change to a Western-style diet with more refined foods and extended education. David Pritchett Kutuk was awarded the Meritorious Service Cross for his heroic effects in the 1972 plane crash. Other notable Inuk, all-brand Inuit people include the freelance journalist Ozzy Minchin, whose iconic photograph of the activist Armin Fevela went viral after the 2013 anti-fracking protests. East Putuga First Nation. I'm freaking done. I literally am done. Look, I'm not reading the references. Oh wait, actually, I should read the references. The world. Wait. I did it. Doesn't even look like a lot, but it seems like so much. You know, some people might think that this was a waste of time. I think it's just a learning experience. I'm now literally a master at Inuit, so are you? No. Unless if you watch this whole video, in which no one would do that, so I don't know. If you see this, this is the end of the video. Goodbye.